The restaurant seemed to quiet around them as Harrison's voice rose with ugly certainty. That's it, isn't it? This whole week was you playing the sweet consultant while you figured out exactly how much I'm worth. His handsome features twisted with suspicion as he leaned forward across the candlelit table. Single woman, boutique consulting, conveniently available for a romantic week. You're nothing but a gold digger who played the long game. Zara felt the accusation hit like a physical slap. Other diners turned to stare as Harrison's celebration dinner transformed into a public humiliation. Welcome back, Golden. If you're new here, you're about to witness a tale that will change how you see success, love, and the dangerous cost of assumptions. To my incredible subscribers who make this channel possible, thank you for being part of this journey. Your comments and stories inspire every narrative I share. Hit that like button right now if you've ever been underestimated. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that they should never dim their light for anyone. And if you're ready for stories that will make you question everything you think you know about love and power, subscribe and ring that notification bell. Now, let's get back to the story. Zara Williams closed her laptop after reviewing the reports from her private equity empire. $3 billion in assets, 23 companies in her portfolio, and complete anonymity by design. While other billionaires courted publicity, Zara had spent millions ensuring the opposite. No magazine covers, no social media presence, no public appearances. The mahogany desk in her Manhattan penthouse office reflected the morning sun streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. Beyond the glass, the city buzzed with ambition, unaware that one of its most powerful residents remained deliberately invisible. Ms. Williams, the car is ready for Mendocino, her assistant announced from the doorway. Perfect. The twins are already packed. Yes, ma'am. Rebecca has them ready. The resort confirms adjoining suites and full childcare services during conference hours. Zara smiled, though the expression carried a weight that had accumulated over years of building her empire in solitude. The Small Business Leadership Conference would be perfect for her experiment. She'd registered under her middle name, Nia Thompson, curious to network without the burden of her reputation. Success had come with an unexpected price. Every relationship in her adult life had followed the same devastating pattern. Men were initially attracted to her intelligence and drive, but as her wealth grew, so did their discomfort. Some became competitive, trying to outdo her achievements. Others grew resentful, making cutting remarks about her masculine ambition. A few had simply disappeared when they realized she earned more in a month than they made in a year. Her most recent relationship had ended just like all the others. David, a successful surgeon, had seemed different at first. He'd claimed to admire her business acumen, even bragged to friends about dating a real powerhouse. But as months passed, his admiration curdled into something uglier. You make me feel small, Zara, he'd said during their final argument. Every conversation becomes about your deals, your companies, your success. I can't even pay for dinner without you mentioning that the restaurant is in one of your buildings. The accusation had stung because it held a grain of truth. Her world was so vast, her influence so far-reaching, that ordinary experiences often connected to her empire in ways she'd stopped noticing. Maybe the problem isn't me, she replied. Maybe it's men who can't handle a woman who doesn't need them financially. David's laugh had been bitter. You don't need anyone, Zara. That's your problem. You've built this fortress of money and power, and you wonder why no one can get close to you. The words had echoed long after he'd left. Was her success truly a fortress? Had she become so accustomed to being the most powerful person in every room that she'd forgotten how to be vulnerable? Her ex-husband Marcus had said something similar during their divorce proceedings. You changed, Zara. Success made you hard. You used to laugh at my jokes, now you correct my business assumptions. You used to ask my opinion, now you just inform me of your decisions. The pattern was undeniable. The more successful she became, the more isolated she felt. Board meetings filled with men who deferred to her wealth while resenting her gender. Social events where women befriended her for access and men either feared or fetishized her power. 8-year-old twins Amara and Tyler were the only people in her life who loved her unconditionally, but even they were growing up in the shadow of her empire. Private schools, exclusive clubs, carefully vetted friendships. Their childhood was as curated as her public image. Mommy, why don't you have a boyfriend? Amara had asked recently with the brutal honesty of childhood. I'm very busy with work, sweetheart. But Tyler's friend's mom works too, and she has a husband. He helps with homework and makes pancakes on Sundays. The innocent observation had cut deeper than any business rival's attack. Her children were noticing her loneliness, wondering why their successful mother couldn't find someone to share pancake Sundays. Maybe David and Marcus were right. Maybe she had become too much, too successful, too independent, too intimidating for any man to love. The decision to attend the conference as Nia Thompson hadn't been calculated, it had been born from exhaustion. She was tired of being alone at the top, tired of relationships that withered under the weight of her achievements, tired of wondering if love was the price she'd paid for empire. For 1 week, she wanted to experience what ordinary felt like. To see if someone could care for her without knowing about the billions, the boardrooms, the power that apparently made her impossible to love. "Mommy, why are you using your middle name?" Amara had asked while packing her suitcase with the efficiency of a child raised in luxury. "Sometimes it's nice to meet new people without them knowing everything about you first," Zara had explained, though the words felt like an admission of defeat. Tyler, ever practical, had shrugged. "Like when we don't tell kids at school about the private jet?" "Exactly like that, sweetheart." The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd spent years building an empire that commanded respect worldwide, only to discover that respect and love were apparently mutually exclusive. Now, settling into the back seat of her understated sedan, the Bentley would have attracted too much attention. Zara felt the familiar weight of transformation. Her natural curls were styled in a simple updo instead of her usual elegant twist. The modest blazer and understated jewelry belonged to someone who managed other people's money, not someone who owned companies that employed thousands. The drive to Mendocino took 3 hours through California wine country. Zara spent the time reviewing her cover story, though calling it a cover story felt dramatic. Nia Thompson was an investment consultant specializing in portfolio analysis and risk assessment. All technically true, just missing the scale that would make headlines. Her phone buzzed constantly with updates from her various companies. A manufacturing acquisition in Germany needed her approval. The Tokyo office required guidance on a hostile takeover. 3 different CEOs wanted her input on strategic decisions. She ignored them all. For 1 week, Zara Williams would disappear. Nia Thompson would take her place. A woman small enough, ordinary enough, unthreatening enough to be loved. The Mendocino Bay Resort perched on dramatic cliffs overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Luxury disguised as rustic charm, exactly the kind of venue that attracted successful professionals who wanted to network without admitting they were networking. Zara checked in under her assumed identity, accepting the standard suite instead of the presidential penthouse she usually occupied. The twins settled into their adjoining room with Rebecca, their nanny, chattering excitedly about the resort's activities while remaining completely separate from her experiment. The conference registration desk buzzed with mid-level executives comparing business cards and discussing quarterly projections. Zara collected her name tag, Nia Thompson, Investment Consulting, and felt the strange liberation of anonymity. Nobody recognized her. Nobody deferred to her authority. Nobody calculated her net worth with hungry eyes. For the first time in years, she was just another professional in a sea of ambition. The opening reception filled the resort's main ballroom with a careful networking dance of people who wanted to advance their careers without appearing desperate. Zara nursed a glass of wine and observed the social dynamics with the analytical mind that had built her empire. These were good people. Hardworking, ambitious, genuine in their desire to improve their companies and communities. They represented the backbone of American business. The regional managers, department heads, and small business owners who actually made the economy function. She'd forgotten what it felt like to be among them instead of above them. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" Zara looked up from her wine to see a tall man in an expensive suit approaching her table. His conference badge read Harrison Blake, CO, Blake Industries. Even in the dim lighting, she could see the confidence that came with success, though something in his eyes suggested it was newly acquired. "Please join me," she gestured to the empty chair, curious about this stranger who would either validate her fears about love and success, or prove that somewhere in the world existed a man secure enough to celebrate her achievements instead of feeling threatened by them. If you're enjoying this story of hidden identity and the price of success, drop a comment below about whether you think love and ambition can truly coexist. Your insights help shape these narratives. Harrison Blake settled into the chair with the easy grace of someone accustomed to commanding attention. His handshake was firm, his smile practiced, but Zara noticed the way his eyes quickly assessed her appearance with barely concealed calculation. "Harrison Blake," he introduced himself. "And you are?" "Nia Thompson. Investment Consulting." The shift in his expression was immediate and telling. His posture relaxed, his smile became more genuine, and something that might have been relief flickered across his features. "Ah, boutique firm? Family wealth management." Zara nodded vaguely, fascinated by his assumptions. "Something like that." Well, it's refreshing to meet someone who doesn't have to deal with real corporate pressure. Harrison leaned back with satisfaction. Manufacturing is serious business. Supply chains, labor negotiations, international regulations. Not like pushing papers around for trust fund babies. She nearly laughed. Last month she'd personally restructured 2 manufacturing giants, but Harrison clearly saw her as small-time. The condescension in his voice was so casual, so automatic, that she wondered if he even realized he was doing it. Must be challenging, she said mildly, taking another sip of wine. You have no idea. Everyone wants something from successful people like myself. It's nice to have a genuine conversation with someone who isn't calculating angles. If only you knew, Zara thought, mentally cataloging every inefficiency she'd noticed in Blake Industries' public filings during her pre-conference research. Their first conversation lasted 2 hours. Harrison spoke passionately about manufacturing innovation, his vision for modernizing traditional industries, his frustration with competitors who lacked imagination. Despite his arrogance, Zara found herself drawn to his genuine enthusiasm for his work. The problem with most CEOs, he said, gesturing with his wineglass, is they think too small. They see obstacles where visionaries see opportunities. And you consider yourself a visionary? She asked with a slight smile. I don't consider myself anything. Results speak for themselves. His confidence was magnetic even when it bordered on arrogance. Blake Industries has grown 40% since I took over. That's not luck, that's leadership. When the reception ended, Harrison walked her to the elevator bank. Would you like to have dinner tomorrow night? There's an excellent restaurant in town, and I'd enjoy continuing our conversation. Zara hesitated. This was exactly what she'd hoped for, a connection with someone who saw her as an equal, not a conquest or a threat. I'd like that. The next evening, Harrison arrived at her hotel room door with a bouquet of wildflowers he'd clearly picked from the resort grounds. The gesture was spontaneous, charming, and completely unexpected. I thought you might appreciate something more personal than the standard roses, he said with a boyish grin that transformed his entire face. During dinner at a cozy bistro overlooking the harbor, Harrison revealed layers beneath his corporate persona. He spoke about taking over his father's company, the pressure of living up to family expectations, the loneliness of making decisions that affected hundreds of employees. Sometimes I wonder if my father would be proud of what I've built, he admitted over dessert. He was old school, believed in steady growth, conservative investments. I've taken risks he never would have considered. Do you think he would have been wrong to be cautious? Zara asked. Not wrong, just limited. He saw the company as a legacy to preserve. I see it as a platform for transformation. Harrison's eyes grew distant. But transformation requires courage. Most people prefer the safety of mediocrity. The comment stung slightly, but Zara recognized the loneliness behind it. She'd felt the same isolation, the weight of being the only person willing to make difficult decisions. Success can be isolating, she said quietly. Exactly. Harrison leaned forward, his voice dropping to something more intimate. Everyone wants to be around successful people, but they don't understand the cost. The constant pressure, the way every decision affects so many lives, the difficulty of knowing who you can trust. For the first time since they'd met, Zara felt a genuine connection. This was the conversation she'd hoped for, 2 successful people acknowledging the hidden costs of achievement. Their third evening together, Harrison suggested a walk along the resort's private beach. The setting sun painted the Pacific in shades of gold and crimson as they strolled barefoot through the sand. Tell me something about yourself that has nothing to do with work, Harrison said, stopping to pick up a smooth piece of sea glass. Zara considered the question carefully. I love watching old movies with people I care about. There's something comforting about stories where everything works out in the end. Romantic comedies? He teased. Classic films. Casablanca, Roman Holiday, The Philadelphia Story. Stories about people who discover they're not who they thought they were. Harrison handed her the sea glass, their fingers brushing in the exchange. Maybe that's what we're all doing, discovering who we really are beneath the roles we play. The moment felt charged with possibility. Zara found herself studying his profile in the fading light, noting the way his usual confidence softened into something more vulnerable. Do you ever feel like you're playing a role? She asked. Every day. CEO's son, leader, sometimes I wonder who I'd be without the titles. He turned to face her fully. But tonight, walking with you, I feel like myself. Just Harrison, not Harrison Blake of Blake Industries. The admission was so honest, so unexpected, that Zara felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crack. This was what she'd been searching for. Someone who understood the weight of success, who could see past the surface to the person underneath. When Harrison kissed her that night, soft and tentative under the starlight, Zara allowed herself to believe that maybe her experiment was working. Maybe she'd found someone who could love her for who she was, not what she represented. The fourth day brought a shift in their dynamic. Harrison grew more possessive of her time, more territorial when other conference attendees tried to engage her in conversation. "You're quite popular," he observed after a networking lunch where several executives had sought her insights on market trends. "People are friendly here," Zara replied carefully. "Friendly or calculating? I noticed how they perked up when you mentioned portfolio analysis. Everyone's looking for an angle." The comment revealed an ugly suspicion that hadn't been there before. Harrison was beginning to see threats where none existed, competition in casual professional conversations. "Not everyone has ulterior motives," she said. "In my experience, everyone does. The key is figuring out what they want before they figure out what you're worth." That evening, Harrison's conversation turned increasingly to his upcoming IPO. What had started as professional excitement was becoming something more obsessive. "This changes everything, Nia. Not just financially, though $50 million is certainly life-changing, but socially, professionally. I'll finally have the resources to live the life I've always envisioned." "What kind of life is that?" Zara asked, though she was beginning to suspect the answer. "The kind where money is never a consideration. Private jets, exclusive resorts, the best of everything." His eyes gleamed with anticipation. "Success attracts quality people. It opens doors that were previously closed." The phrase quality people made Zara's stomach turn. Harrison was beginning to sound like he viewed relationships as another luxury to be acquired. "Money changes people," she said quietly. "It reveals who they really are," Harrison corrected. "I've always known I was meant for more than middle-class limitations. This IPO just makes it official." On their fifth evening together, Harrison's mask slipped further. Over wine on the resort's terrace, he spoke about his plans with increasing grandiosity. "I'm already looking at penthouses in Manhattan. The Hamptons for weekends, maybe a place in Aspen for skiing. And the cars. Ferrari for pleasure driving, Bentley for business, something exotic for special occasions." Zara listened with growing unease. This wasn't the satisfaction of achievement, it was the hunger of someone who equated wealth with worth. "You seem to have it all planned out," she managed. "I've been planning this for years. Every decision, every sacrifice has been building toward this moment." Harrison reached across the table to take her hand. "I want to share it with someone who understands what it means to build something significant." The gesture should have been romantic. Instead, it felt like a business proposition. "What do you mean?" she asked. "You understand the consulting world, the pressure of managing other people's expectations. You'd fit perfectly into the life I'm building." His thumb traced across her knuckles. "Successful men need partners who can navigate their world without being intimidated by it." The casual assumption that she would naturally slot into his vision made Zara's blood run cold. Harrison wasn't seeing her as an equal partner. He was casting her as a supporting character in his success story. "That's quite an assumption," she said carefully. "Is it wrong? You're intelligent, sophisticated, beautiful. You understand business without competing with it. You're exactly the kind of woman a man like me should be with." The phrase, "a man like me," revealed everything. Harrison had categorized her as suitable for his new status, like selecting the right wine for an expensive dinner. Their sixth evening together, Harrison's excitement reached a fever pitch. His phone buzzed constantly with updates from his investment bankers, each notification feeding his growing mania. "The pre-orders are exceeding expectations," he announced over dinner. "We might price higher than anticipated. This could be even bigger than I imagined." Zara watched his transformation with fascination and horror. The thoughtful man who'd picked wildflowers was disappearing, replaced by someone intoxicated by the promise of wealth. "You must be proud of what you've built," she said. "Proud? I'm vindicated. Everyone who doubted me, everyone who said I was too aggressive, too ambitious, they're about to see exactly what vision and courage can accomplish." His need for validation was becoming desperate, his success measured not by personal satisfaction but by others' recognition of his worth. "Success means different things to different people," Zara observed. "Success means freedom. Freedom from limitations, from other people's opinions, from having to justify your choices to anyone." Harrison's eyes gleamed with something beyond joy, something closer to mania. "When you have real money, real power, the world becomes your playground." The conversation continued, but Zara found herself studying Harrison as if seeing him clearly for the first time. Beneath his charm and intelligence lay something darker, an insecurity so profound that no amount of wealth would ever fill it. She'd been attracted to his confidence, his passion for his work, his apparent understanding of success's isolation. But she was beginning to realize that Harrison's loneliness wasn't the noble burden of leadership. It was the natural consequence of viewing other people as either threats or opportunities. Their final evening together arrived with the weight of unfinished business. Harrison had made reservations at the resort's most exclusive restaurant, an intimate space overlooking the ocean where candlelight danced across white tablecloths and crystal stemware. "To new beginnings," Harrison said, raising his champagne flute as they settled into their corner table. Zara clinked her glass against his, noting the manic energy that had replaced his earlier charm. His phone lay face up on the table, buzzing every few minutes with notifications that made his eyes light up with increasing fervor. "The final numbers came in this afternoon," he announced, unable to contain his excitement. $52 million. Can you believe it? 52 million. "Congratulations," Zara said, though something in his tone made her uneasy. This wasn't the satisfaction of achievement, it was the intoxication of someone who'd confused wealth with worth. Harrison's phone erupted with another series of notifications. He grabbed it eagerly, his face transforming with each message. "Nia, this is incredible. The IPO launches next week, and everything is falling into place." She smiled genuinely despite her growing concerns. "You must be thrilled." "Thrilled? I'm about to be worth $52 million. His voice carried across the quiet restaurant, drawing glances from other diners. "I'm upgrading everything. Manhattan penthouse, Hamptons estate, maybe a yacht collection." The transformation was startling. The thoughtful man who'd picked wildflowers had vanished, replaced by someone drunk on the promise of luxury. "And the cars?" Harrison continued, his eyes gleaming with something beyond joy. "Ferrari for weekends, Lamborghini for special occasions, Bentley for daily driving. Maybe something custom-made. When you have this kind of money, why settle for what everyone else can buy?" Zara watched his metamorphosis with growing alarm. Each mention of wealth seemed to feed something hungry inside him, something that would never be satisfied no matter how much he accumulated. "Private jets, exclusive clubs, five-star everything," he went on, his voice rising with excitement. "The world is about to become my playground." "That's quite a change from your current lifestyle," Zara managed. Harrison leaned forward conspiratorially, his champagne-flushed face animated with anticipation. "And the women, Nia. You have no idea how success changes everything. Women are going to throw themselves at me." The casual comment landed like ice water in her veins. "Women. Beautiful women, sophisticated women, women who understand what real success looks like." He gestured expansively, apparently oblivious to her stiffening posture. "When you're worth $50 million, you attract a completely different caliber of person." Zara felt something cold settle in her stomach. "A different caliber? You know what I mean. Models, actresses, socialites, women who appreciate the finer things in life. Women who understand that successful men deserve exceptional partners." The restaurant seemed to grow quieter around them as Harrison's voice carried his ugly enthusiasm. Other diners were beginning to stare, but he appeared completely unaware of the spectacle he was creating. "I see," Zara said quietly, her voice carefully controlled despite the pain blooming in her chest. "Don't get me wrong," Harrison continued, reaching across the table to pat her hand condescendingly. "You're lovely, Nia. Really. But let's be realistic about what my new status means. I'll be moving in completely different circles now." The dismissal was so casual, so matter-of-fact, that for a moment Zara couldn't process what she was hearing. The man who'd kissed her under the stars was now explaining why she wasn't good enough for his upgraded lifestyle. "Different circles," she repeated, her grandmother's ring suddenly feeling heavy on her finger. "Exclusive events, private clubs, international society. The kind of world where your background and connections matter as much as your appearance." Harrison's tone was almost gentle, as if he were explaining something obvious to a child. "You understand, don't you? A man in my position needs a partner who can enhance his reputation, not someone from a small consulting firm." The words cut deeper than any business rival's attack ever had. Zara had built an empire worth billions, commanded respect from world leaders, and revolutionized entire industries. Yet here she sat, being dismissed as inadequate by a man whose company she could buy with pocket change. "You're saying I'm not suitable for your new life," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I'm saying we want different things. You're content with your small practice, your modest lifestyle. There's nothing wrong with that, it's just not compatible with where I'm headed. Harrison's phone buzzed again and he grabbed it eagerly, his attention already moving past her to whatever notification promised more validation of his worth. My publicist wants to discuss media appearances, he said, scrolling through messages. Apparently, several business magazines want interviews. This is just the beginning, Nia. The beginning of everything I've worked for. Zara watched him lose himself in his phone, marveling at how completely money had corrupted whatever decency he'd once possessed. The loneliness he'd shared, the vulnerability he'd shown, all of it had been real, but it was being consumed by something far more powerful than his need for connection. Harrison, she said quietly. He looked up from his phone with obvious irritation at the interruption. What? Do you hear yourself? Do you understand what you're saying? I'm being honest. Isn't that what you want? Honesty about where we both stand. The casual cruelty of his dismissal was breathtaking. Harrison genuinely believed he was being kind by explaining why she wasn't good enough for his elevated status. You're right, Zara said, her voice steady despite the devastation spreading through her chest. You are being honest. Thank you for that. Harrison smiled with satisfaction, apparently relieved that she was taking his rejection so well. I knew you'd understand. You're a practical woman, that's one of the things I've appreciated about you. The phrase appreciated stung like a slap. Past tense. Their week together was already history in his mind, a pleasant interlude before his real life began. His phone erupted with another series of notifications, and his attention snapped back to the screen with the desperate hunger of an addict seeking his next fix. 3 different investment firms want to meet next week, he announced, his voice rising with excitement. And my banker thinks we should consider international expansion immediately after the IPO. Zara studied his face as he scrolled through messages, noting the way his features had hardened with greed and ambition. The man who'd spoken about loneliness and isolation had been replaced by someone who saw other people as accessories to his success. You seem to have everything figured out, she observed. I do. For the first time in my life, I have real power, real influence. I can have anything I want, be with anyone I choose. He looked up from his phone with eyes that glittered with mania. Money doesn't just buy things, Nia. It buys freedom. Freedom from limitations, from other people's opinions, from having to settle for less than you deserve. The irony was staggering. Harrison thought money would free him from other people's opinions while simultaneously making him desperate for their validation. He believed wealth would eliminate limitations while creating new ones based on status and exclusivity. And what do you think you deserve? Zara asked. Everything. The best of everything. The most beautiful women, the most exclusive experiences, the highest level of respect and recognition. His voice carried the fervor of someone who'd confused accumulation with achievement. I've worked for this my entire life. I deserve to enjoy every benefit it brings. As the evening progressed, Harrison's excitement grew more manic, his vision of wealth more elaborate. He spoke of penthouses and yachts, exclusive clubs and exotic vacations, as if accumulating luxury items would somehow validate his existence. But beneath the grandiose plans, Zara detected something darker, a growing paranoia about people's motivations. The thing about money, Harrison said, leaning forward conspiratorially, is that it reveals everyone's true nature. Suddenly, people who never gave you a second glance are your best friends. Women who wouldn't return your calls are fascinated by your success. That must be difficult to navigate, Zara said carefully. It's a game and I'm finally learning the rules. Everyone wants something. Access, connections, money, status. The key is figuring out what they're after before they figure out how to get it. His cynicism was becoming toxic, poisoning every interaction with suspicion and calculation. Harrison was transforming into exactly the kind of person Zara had spent years avoiding. Someone who saw relationships as transactions and love as leverage. You don't think anyone could care about you for who you are? She asked. Who I am is a man worth $50 million. That's not separate from my success. That is my success. Harrison's smile was sharp with newfound wisdom. The sooner you accept that people are motivated by self-interest, the better you can protect yourself from disappointment. The words revealed the profound emptiness at his core. Harrison had convinced himself that wealth was his only valuable quality, which meant anyone who claimed to love him must be lying. That's a lonely way to live, Zara observed. Lonely? I'll never be lonely again. Money attracts people like a magnet. The challenge isn't finding company, it's finding quality company. As dessert arrived, Harrison's mood shifted again, this time toward something more calculating. He studied Zara across the table with new intensity, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. You know, Nia, I've been thinking about our week together, he said slowly. Oh. It's interesting timing, don't you think? A single woman, conveniently available for a romantic week, just as I'm about to come into serious money. The accusation was subtle but unmistakable. Zara felt her blood turn cold as she recognized the paranoid suspicion creeping into his voice. What are you suggesting? She asked quietly. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm observing. You're mysterious about your clients, vague about your income, and remarkably interested in a man who's about to be worth $50 million. The restaurant seemed to quiet around them as Harrison's voice took on an edge of ugly certainty. Most women would be over the moon hearing about penthouses and private jets, he continued, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. But you seem calculating. Like you're already figuring out how to get a piece of it. The accusation hung in the air between them like poison. Zara stared at the stranger wearing Harrison's face, wondering how she'd been so completely wrong about his character. You think I'm after your money, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I think you're exactly what you appear to be, a smart woman who knows an opportunity when she sees one. Harrison leaned back with satisfaction, apparently pleased with his deductive reasoning. The question is, what's your angle? Marriage? A business partnership? Or are you just looking for a wealthy boyfriend to upgrade your lifestyle? The casual cruelty of his accusation was breathtaking. Harrison had taken their week of genuine connection and twisted it into evidence of her supposed deception. That's what you think of me, Zara said, her voice steady despite the chaos erupting inside her chest. That's what I think of everyone now. Money changes the game, Nia. It makes you a target for every gold digger, social climber, and opportunist looking for an easy score. The phrase gold digger landed like a physical blow. Zara felt something fundamental shift inside her, the last of her illusions about Harrison crumbling into dust. You're absolutely right, Harrison, she said quietly, standing from her chair with dignity that surprised them both. I was pretending to be someone I'm not. His triumphant smile faltered at her calm acceptance. Thank you for showing me exactly who you are when you think you have power over someone. She placed cash on the table, more than enough to cover both meals. Enjoy your IPO celebration. As she walked away with quiet grace, Harrison called after her, but Zara didn't turn back. She was done diminishing herself to make insecure men comfortable. Behind her, she heard him muttering to other diners about gold diggers and lucky escapes, apparently convinced he'd dodged a bullet. Share your thoughts below if you've ever been completely wrong about someone's character. Sometimes people show us exactly who they are, we just have to be willing to see it. 3 days later, Harrison Blake settled into seat 2A of the first-class cabin, champagne already bubbling in his crystal flute. The IPO celebration in New York would be legendary. He dodged a bullet with that gold digger in California, no matter how attractive she'd been. His phone displayed 17 missed calls from investors, 3 interview requests from financial magazines, and congratulatory messages from business contacts. $52 million. The number still made him euphoric. Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the brief delay, the captain announced. We're waiting for our final first-class passengers to board. Harrison waved dismissively at the flight attendant, scrolling through profit projections and media requests. Life was perfect. The Blake Industries IPO had launched flawlessly, institutional investors were fighting over shares, and his net worth had officially entered the stratosphere. He'd already put deposits on 3 luxury properties and ordered his first Ferrari. The Manhattan penthouse would be ready by Christmas, complete with a wine cellar and private elevator. Everything he'd dreamed of was finally within reach. Movement in his peripheral vision made him glance up from his phone. His champagne flute slipped from nerveless fingers, crystal exploding against the cabin floor in a shower of sparkling fragments. Nia Thompson walked down the aisle in a tailored charcoal suit that screamed serious money. But it wasn't just the clothes, everything about her had transformed. Her natural curls were styled in an elegant twist, diamond earrings caught the cabin light, and her entire bearing radiated the confident authority of someone accustomed to being the most powerful person in any room. Behind her followed 2 beautiful children, twins with warm brown skin and bright, intelligent eyes, moving with the practiced ease of frequent first-class travelers. "Mommy, are we in our usual seats?" one twin asked in a crisp accent that suggested expensive international schooling. "Yes, darling. Just across from someone I met at the conference." Nia's eyes met Harrison's briefly, coolly, before she helped her children settle into the front row. Harrison's brain refused to process what he was seeing. The modest consultant from Mendocino was gone, replaced by someone who belonged in boardrooms and private jets. The flight attendant approached her with the deference reserved for airlines' most valued customers. "Ms. Williams, welcome back. The captain wanted me to personally ensure your comfort. Your usual arrangements for the children?" Williams. The name triggered something in Harrison's memory, but shock prevented him from placing it. "Thank you, Patricia. And please tell Captain Rodriguez I appreciate his discretion." The twins chattered quietly in fluent Mandarin, then switched to French when discussing their upcoming school term in Switzerland. Nia answered effortlessly in both languages while reviewing documents that looked distinctly like acquisition reports. Harrison watched in stunned silence as his entire understanding of reality crumbled. The woman he'd dismissed as unsuitable for his upgraded lifestyle was conducting business with the casual authority of someone who personally knew half the Fortune 500 CEOs. Her phone rang. She answered in perfect Japanese. "Hi, Tanaka-san. Yes, I'm still considering diversifying into manufacturing. The Blake Industries IPO caught our attention, but I have serious concerns about the leadership structure." Harrison's blood turned to Arctic ice. She was discussing his company. His IPO. With what sounded like major international investors. "The CEO appears technically competent, but my team has concerns about his judgment regarding stakeholder relations and cultural sensitivity," Nia continued in English, her voice carrying clearly in the quiet cabin. Character issues could pose significant PR risks post-acquisition. She was talking about him. To investors who could make or break his public offering. "Mommy," one twin whispered, "is that the rude man from your conference?" "Yes, sweetheart. The one who called Mommy a gold digger." The child's voice carried with crystal clarity. Several passengers turned to stare at Harrison, whose face had drained of all color. "But Mommy, didn't your company buy 3 airlines last year? You could probably buy his whole company if you wanted." "Money isn't everything, Tyler. Character matters more." Harrison wanted to disappear through the aircraft floor. Around him, business travelers were beginning to recognize Nia, or rather, whoever she really was. Whispered conversations filled the cabin as passengers pulled out phones and tablets. Williams Capital. The invisible billionaire. Private equity queen. His phone buzzed with a news alert that made his remaining color drain completely. Williams Capital CEO considers major investment in manufacturing sector, Blake Industries IPO under review. The accompanying photo showed Nia at what looked like a World Economic Forum panel, surrounded by heads of state and industry titans. The caption read, "Zara Williams, founder and CEO of Williams Capital, controls assets worth over $3 billion. $3 billion. The woman he'd called a gold digger was worth 60 times more than his entire net worth and held his company's future in her manicured hands. The flight to New York lasted 6 hours and felt like 6 lifetimes. Harrison watched in horrified fascination as Zara conducted business with the casual authority of someone who personally influenced global markets. She video called with the Japanese Prime Minister about trade agreements. In Japanese. She reviewed acquisition documents for deals worth more than his entire company's valuation, all while completely ignoring his existence. Other passengers approached her with respectful deference, seeking insights on market trends and investment opportunities. She responded with the gracious professionalism of someone accustomed to being consulted by world leaders. "Ms. Williams, I'm David Chen from Goldman Sachs." One passenger introduced himself during the meal service. "I wanted to thank you personally for the Seoul Semiconductor deal. Your restructuring saved thousands of jobs." "The credit belongs to the management team," Zara replied modestly. "We simply provided the capital and strategic framework." Harrison listened to the conversation with growing horror. The Seoul Semiconductor deal had been front-page news in the Financial Times, a $2 billion acquisition that had revolutionized an entire industry. And Zara Williams had orchestrated it. "Are you considering any new manufacturing investments?" Chen asked. "The sector seems ripe for consolidation." "We're always evaluating opportunities," Zara said diplomatically. "Though we're particularly cautious about leadership quality in that space. Technical competence isn't enough. We need partners who understand stakeholder relations and cultural sensitivity." Her words were clearly directed at Harrison, though she never looked in his direction. The message was unmistakable. His behavior at the conference had cost him the investment opportunity of a lifetime. As the flight progressed, Harrison's phone buzzed with increasingly frantic messages from his investment bankers. Williams Capital's interest in Blake Industries had generated massive attention from other institutional investors. Her potential backing could have elevated his company into the top tier of manufacturing firms. Instead, her public skepticism was causing other investors to reconsider their positions. Mr. Blake. A flight attendant approached his seat. The gentleman in 4C would like to speak with you. Harrison looked back to see a man in an expensive suit gesturing him over. Desperate for any distraction from his humiliation, he made his way down the aisle. Harrison Blake, right? I'm Michael Torres, managing partner at Steinberg Capital. The man's handshake was firm but his expression was troubled. I wanted to ask you about the Williams Capital situation. What situation? Harrison asked, though he suspected he already knew. Their concerns about Blake Industries' leadership. We were considering a significant investment, but Zara Williams' assessment carries enormous weight in our decision-making process. Torres studied Harrison's face carefully. Is there something we should know about your management approach? The question was polite but pointed. Harrison realized that Zara's casual comments about his character were already influencing major investment decisions. I'm not sure what she's referring to, Harrison said weakly. She mentioned concerns about stakeholder relations and cultural sensitivity. In our experience, Williams Capital doesn't make those kinds of statements lightly. Torres leaned forward. Between you and me, what happened at that conference? Harrison opened his mouth then closed it. How could he explain that he'd accused one of the world's most successful investors of being a gold digger? That he'd dismissed her as unsuitable for his lifestyle while she was worth 60 times more than him? There may have been a misunderstanding, he managed. A misunderstanding that cost you a $3 billion investor? Torres shook his head. That's not a misunderstanding, Mr. Blake. That's a catastrophe. Harrison returned to his seat with the devastating realization that his arrogance had cost him far more than a romantic relationship. He'd lost the investment that could have transformed his company forever. For the remainder of the flight, he watched Zara Williams conduct business with world leaders while her children completed homework in multiple languages. Every conversation, every phone call, every casual interaction revealed the vast scope of her influence and intelligence. She was everything he'd pretended to be, a visionary leader who'd built an empire through strategic thinking and calculated risks. While he'd inherited a company and taken it public, she'd created an investment firm that shaped global markets. The irony was crushing. He'd spent the week lecturing her about business while she quietly assessed whether his company was worthy of her attention. He'd dismissed her as small-time while she controlled assets that dwarfed his entire industry. As the plane began its descent into New York, Harrison's phone erupted with notifications. The financial press had picked up the Williams Capital story, and speculation about Blake Industries' leadership was spreading across social media. Blake Industries CEO faces investor skepticism after Williams Capital concerns. Character questions surround manufacturing IPO. Williams Capital passes on Blake Industries. What do they know? Each headline drove another nail into the coffin of his reputation. By the time they landed, Harrison Blake would be known not as a visionary CEO, but as the man who'd insulted Zara Williams. The plane touched down at JFK with a gentle bump that felt like the end of everything Harrison had worked to achieve. As passengers began gathering their belongings, he summoned the courage to approach the woman who held his future in her hands. Excuse me, Harrison whispered when she stepped into the aisle. Could we please talk? Zara regarded him with the cool assessment she might give a quarterly earnings disappointment. I don't believe we have anything to discuss, Mr. Blake. Please. I made a terrible mistake. You made an assumption based on outdated stereotypes about women and money. That wasn't a mistake. That was character. Her voice remained perfectly pleasant and utterly devastating. Around them, other passengers were listening with obvious interest. Harrison's humiliation was becoming a public spectacle. I didn't know who you were. Know what? That women can build their own empires? That single mothers aren't automatically opportunists? That perhaps a woman might have legitimate reasons for privacy that have nothing to do with deception? Harrison opened his mouth then closed it. Every excuse sounded pathetic even in his own head. For what it's worth, Zara continued, I was pretending to be someone I wasn't. My ex-husband convinced me that my success was intimidating, that I needed to be less, to be lovable. So I tried being ordinary for a week. She smiled, but it held no warmth. Thank you for reminding me why that was a mistake. A man worth having would celebrate my achievements, not feel threatened by them. I could learn, Harrison began desperately. Could you? Learn to respect successful women? Examine your unconscious biases about gender and wealth? Stop measuring people's worth by what you think they can do for you. Zara's tone remained conversational. Those are admirable goals, Harrison. I hope you pursue them. She paused, letting the silence stretch. But not with me as your practice partner. She gathered her children and moved toward the exit, leaving Harrison with the devastating realization that he'd lost something infinitely more valuable than money. He'd lost the chance to know the most remarkable woman he'd ever encountered. And worse, his arrogance had just cost him the investment that could have transformed his company forever. The jetway stretched ahead like a tunnel to Harrison's professional execution. As passengers filed off the plane, whispered conversations followed in his wake. Business cards were being exchanged, phones were buzzing with messages, and Harrison Blake was becoming the cautionary tale that would circulate through Manhattan's financial district by morning. "Excuse me, Mr. Blake?" A young woman with a press badge approached as he entered the terminal. "Jennifer Walsh, Financial Tribune. Could I get a comment on Williams Capital's assessment of your leadership capabilities?" Harrison's mouth went dry. "No comment. Is it true you had personal interactions with Ms. Williams prior to her investment decision?" "Some sources suggest." "I said no comment." Harrison pushed past the reporter, but her questions followed him through the terminal like accusations. His phone had become a weapon of mass destruction, each notification delivering another blow to his crumbling reputation. Text messages from board members, missed calls from investors, email alerts about declining pre-market confidence in Blake Industries stock. The ride into Manhattan felt like a funeral procession. Harrison stared out the taxi window at the city lights, each gleaming tower a reminder of the empire he'd almost built and the woman who'd just demolished it with surgical precision. His penthouse apartment, purchased with IPO proceeds he'd counted before they hatched, felt hollow and pretentious. The Ferrari brochures scattered across his coffee table mocked him with their promises of luxury he could no longer afford to flaunt. Harrison poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey and tried to process the magnitude of his miscalculation. Zara Williams wasn't just wealthy, she was a force of nature who'd built her empire while he was still learning to read quarterly reports. She commanded respect from world leaders while he struggled to manage a mid-sized manufacturing company. The irony was suffocating. He'd spent a week lecturing her about business strategy while she quietly evaluated whether his company deserved her attention. Every condescending comment, every dismissive gesture, every arrogant assumption had been catalogued by one of the most powerful investors in the world. His laptop chimed with an email from his head of investor relations. The subject line made his stomach drop. "Emergency board meeting, 8 a.m. tomorrow." Harrison opened the message with trembling fingers. Harrison Williams Capital's public concerns have triggered a cascade of investor inquiries. 3 major institutional investors have requested clarification on leadership stability. The board wants answers. This could affect our entire market position. Sarah. He scrolled through his phone, watching his professional obituary write itself in real time across financial news sites and social media platforms. Blake Industries CEO faces character questions after high-profile investor rejection. Williams Capital cites leadership concerns in manufacturing sector pass. Sources: Blake CEO made inappropriate comments to billionaire investor. The last headline made his blood freeze. Someone had leaked details about their personal interaction. Harrison realized that Zara's influence extended far beyond her investment decisions. She had connections throughout the financial world who would ensure his behavior became industry knowledge. His phone rang. The caller ID showed his father's number. "Dad." "Harrison." His father's voice carried the weight of disappointment that had haunted Harrison's childhood. "I just got off the phone with 3 board members. They're concerned about your judgment. It's not what it looks like. It looks like you insulted one of the most respected investors in the world and cost our company a transformational partnership." His father's tone was ice cold. "Is that accurate?" Harrison closed his eyes, remembering the moment he'd called Zara a gold digger. The memory felt like swallowing broken glass. There was a misunderstanding. "A misunderstanding? Son, Zara Williams controls more wealth than some small countries. Her endorsement could have elevated Blake Industries into the Fortune 500. Her rejection." His father's voice trailed off into silence. "I can fix this," Harrison said desperately. "How?" "By apologizing to a woman you publicly humiliated? By explaining to our investors that their CEO lacks the basic judgment to recognize one of the world's most successful business leaders." His father's laugh was bitter. "The board is meeting tomorrow to discuss your future with the company." The line went dead, leaving Harrison alone with the wreckage of his ambitions. He spent the night researching Zara Williams, discovering the scope of an empire that made his achievements look like a child's lemonade stand. Williams Capital had revolutionized 3 industries, saved countless jobs through strategic restructuring, and generated returns that made other private equity firms look amateur. She'd built her fortune through intelligence, vision, and calculated risks while maintaining a reputation for integrity that was legendary in business circles. CEOs sought her advice, governments consulted her on economic policy, and her investment decisions moved markets. Harrison had dismissed this titan of industry as a small-time consultant looking for a wealthy boyfriend. The emergency board meeting convened at 8 a.m. sharp in Blake Industries conference room. Harrison faced 12 stern faces around a mahogany table, each representing decades of business experience and collective disappointment in his leadership. "Gentlemen," Harrison began, but his father cut him off with a raised hand. "Before you speak, let me share what we've learned overnight." His father opened a tablet and began reading. Williams Capital manages assets worth $3.2 billion. They've successfully restructured 47 companies, created over 200,000 jobs, and generated average returns of 38% annually. The numbers landed like physical blows. Harrison's IPO had raised $52 million, barely enough to register on Zara's balance sheet. Furthermore, his father continued, Ms. Williams is known throughout the industry for her discretion, integrity, and strategic brilliance. Her investment decisions are studied at Harvard Business School. Her restructuring methods are considered the gold standard for private equity. Board member after board member shared similar research, painting a picture of a woman whose influence extended far beyond Harrison's comprehension. "The question before us," said Margaret Chin, the board's longest-serving member, "is whether Blake Industries can survive the reputational damage caused by our CEO's behavior." "What exactly happened at that conference?" demanded Robert Torres, the company's largest outside investor. Harrison found himself recounting the week's events, each detail more humiliating than the last. The board listened in stunned silence as he described dismissing Zara as unsuitable for his lifestyle, lecturing her about business strategy, and finally accusing her of being a gold digger. "You called Zara Williams a gold digger," Margaret repeated slowly, as if testing whether the words made sense in any language. "I didn't know who she was." "That's the problem," Robert interrupted. "You made assumptions based on gender and appearance rather than taking the time to understand who you were dealing with. That's not just poor judgment, it's a character flaw that could destroy this company." The meeting continued for 3 brutal hours. Harrison watched his authority evaporate as board members discussed his future in the third person, as if he'd already been removed from consideration. "The damage may be irreversible," Margaret observed. "Williams Capital's rejection has triggered a domino effect. Other institutional investors are questioning our leadership stability. Our stock price has dropped 12% since the story broke," added the CFO. "If this continues, we could face a hostile takeover situation." Harrison's phone buzzed with a text message that made his remaining hope crumble. Williams Capital announces major manufacturing sector investment, partners with Steinberg Industries for $500 million expansion. Steinberg Industries was Blake's primary competitor. Zara had chosen to invest $500 million in the company that would now have the resources to crush Harrison's business. "She's funding our competition," Harrison announced to the room. The board members exchanged glances that spoke volumes about their confidence in his leadership. "Perhaps," his father said quietly, "it's time to consider whether Blake Industries needs new leadership to navigate this crisis." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Harrison realized that his week of playing with fire had burned down everything he'd worked to build. "I can reach out to her," he said desperately. "Apologize, explain that I've learned from this experience." "Son," his father's voice was gentle but final, "some bridges can't be rebuilt once you've burned them. Zara Williams has moved on. The question is whether Blake Industries can do the same." As the meeting adjourned, Harrison found himself alone in the conference room where he'd once felt like a king. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan stretched out below him, a city full of ambitious people who would learn from his mistakes rather than repeat them. His phone buzzed with one final notification, a LinkedIn update from Zara Williams announcing her partnership with Steinberg Industries. The accompanying photo showed her shaking hands with their CEO, both smiling with the satisfaction of a deal that would reshape the manufacturing sector. The caption was simple but devastating, "Excited to partner with leaders who understand that character and competence go hand in hand." Harrison stared at the image of the woman he'd underestimated, realizing that she'd given him exactly what he deserved, a masterclass in consequences. The gold digger had turned out to be made of something far more valuable than gold. And Harrison Blake had just learned that some lessons cost everything you think you're worth. 6 months later, Zara Williams stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of her Manhattan penthouse office, adjusting her emerald jacket before the most important board meeting of her career. The Steinberg Industries partnership had exceeded all projections, creating 12,000 new jobs and revolutionizing manufacturing efficiency across 3 continents. She'd never felt more authentically herself. Her phone buzzed with a text from Amara and Tyler, now settled back into their Manhattan private school routine. "Good luck today, Mom. Remember what you taught us. Never dim your light for anyone who can't handle your brightness." Through the glass, Manhattan sparkled in autumn sunlight. Somewhere in that maze of ambition and steel, Harrison Blake was probably preparing for another day of meetings at whatever consulting firm had hired him after his resignation from Blake Industries. The business press had been surprisingly kind in their coverage of his departure, focusing on strategic restructuring rather than the character failures that had precipitated his downfall. Zara felt no satisfaction in his professional destruction. If anything, she hoped he'd learned something valuable from their encounter, that success without character was just elaborate failure waiting to happen. Her assistant knocked softly. "Ms. Williams, your car is ready for the board meeting." "Thank you, Janet." Zara grabbed her briefcase, checking her reflection in the glass. Designer suit, diamond earrings, grandmother's ring gleaming on her finger. A woman who'd built an empire while honoring her roots. Every inch the powerful woman she'd always been meant to be. The ride to the Williams Capital headquarters took 20 minutes through Manhattan traffic. Zara used the time to review her presentation on the company's expansion into sustainable energy, a sector that promised to define the next decade of global investment. Her phone rang with an international number she recognized immediately. "Zara, it's Kenji Tanaka from Tokyo. I wanted to personally congratulate you on the Steinberg success before your board meeting." "Thank you, Kenji. The partnership has exceeded our most optimistic projections. Your instincts about leadership quality were proven correct once again. Character assessment remains your greatest competitive advantage." The comment made her smile. In the months since the Harrison Blake incident, Zara had refined her investment criteria to place even greater emphasis on leadership integrity. The results had been extraordinary. Companies led by principled executives consistently outperformed those focused solely on profit maximization. "Character creates sustainable value," she replied. "Everything else is just quarterly noise." The Williams Capitol building rose 43 stories above Park Avenue, its glass facade reflecting the ambition and energy of the city below. Zara's private elevator carried her to the executive floor, where her team had assembled for the quarterly review that would shape their strategy for the coming year. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, addressing the 12 brilliant minds who helped manage her empire, "we've achieved something remarkable this quarter. Not just financial returns, though those have been exceptional, but proof that principled investing creates lasting value." The presentation that followed showcased 6 months of unprecedented growth. The Steinberg partnership had generated returns of 42% while creating jobs across 3 countries. Their sustainable energy investments were positioning Williams Capital at the forefront of the green revolution. Most importantly, their focus on character-driven leadership had attracted the industry's most talented executives. "Our success stems from a simple principle," Zara continued, clicking to her final slide. "We invest in people, not just companies. We back leaders who understand that stakeholder value includes employees, communities, and long-term sustainability, not just shareholder profits." The room erupted in applause, but Zara's satisfaction came from something deeper than financial achievement. She'd proven that her values weren't obstacles to success, they were the foundation of it. After the meeting, Zara retreated to her private office to handle the international calls that defined her global influence. A video conference with the European Central Bank about monetary policy. A consultation with the South Korean government on trade agreements. A strategy session with renewable energy executives planning the largest solar installation in African history. Each conversation reinforced her position as someone whose opinion shaped markets and influenced policy at the highest levels of government and industry. As evening approached, Zara allowed herself a moment of reflection. The experiment in Mendocino felt like a lifetime ago, though the lessons remained fresh. She'd learned that authenticity wasn't just personally fulfilling, it was professionally essential. Pretending to be less than she was had nearly cost her the chance to recognize Harrison's character flaws before they could damage her business interests. Her phone chimed with a news alert that made her pause. Blake Industries acquired by international consortium. Former CEO Harrison Blake joins restructuring consultancy. The article was brief but telling. Blake Industries had been sold to a German manufacturing conglomerate after months of declining performance and investor confidence. Harrison had landed on his feet with a respected consulting firm, though his role was significantly diminished from his former CEO position. Zara felt a complex mix of emotions reading about his professional resurrection. Part of her hoped he'd learned from their encounter, that his experience had taught him to value character over conquest. Another part remained skeptical that someone so fundamentally flawed could achieve genuine transformation. Her reflection was interrupted by a knock on her office door. Janet entered with an expression of barely contained excitement. "Ms. Williams, you have a visitor. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's personal rather than business." Zara's eyebrows rose. Very few people had access to her private office without advanced scheduling. "Who is it?" "Harrison Blake. He's waiting in the lobby and asked if you might have 5 minutes to speak with him." The request was so unexpected that Zara needed a moment to process it. Harrison Blake, in her building, asking for a personal conversation 6 months after their disastrous encounter. Did he say what he wanted to discuss? Only that he wanted to apologize properly and thank you for a lesson he needed to learn. Zara considered the request carefully. Her instinct was to decline. Their business was finished and she'd moved far beyond the pain of his accusations. But curiosity won over caution. "Send him up. 5 minutes." Harrison Blake entered her office looking like a man who'd been humbled by experience. Gone was the arrogant confidence that had defined him at the conference. In its place was something quieter, more thoughtful, perhaps even wise. "Thank you for seeing me," he said, remaining standing until she gestured to the chair across from her desk. "You have 5 minutes, Zara replied, her tone professional but not unkind. "I came to apologize. Not for business reasons, I know that bridge is permanently burned, but because you deserved better than the man I was that night in Mendocino." Harrison's voice carried a sincerity that surprised her. This wasn't the desperate pleading of someone seeking professional redemption, but the genuine remorse of someone who'd confronted his own character flaws. "I spent months trying to understand how I could have been so wrong about everything," he continued. "About you, about success, about what really matters in business and life." The answer was uncomfortable but necessary. "And what was that answer?" Zara asked, genuinely curious. "That I'd confused wealth with worth, achievement with character. I thought money would make me important, but it just revealed how small I really was." Harrison met her eyes directly. "You were everything I pretended to be, successful, principled, genuinely powerful. And instead of recognizing that, I saw you as a threat to my fragile ego." The admission was more honest than Zara had expected. She studied his face, noting the absence of the manic energy that had defined him during his IPO celebration. "What have you learned?" she asked. "That character isn't something you can buy or fake. That real success means building something larger than yourself. That the most dangerous person in any room is someone who thinks they're the most important person in that room." Harrison paused, gathering his thoughts. "I also learned that some people like you, succeed because they deserve to, not because they're lucky or ruthless or willing to compromise their values. You built an empire by being exactly who you are, not by pretending to be someone else." The observation was perceptive and painful. Zara remembered her own experiment in diminishing herself, the week she'd spent pretending to be ordinary to attract love. "We all pretend sometimes," she said quietly. "But you pretended to be less than you were. I pretended to be more than I was. There's a fundamental difference." Harrison leaned forward slightly. "You were conducting an experiment in vulnerability. I was conducting a performance in arrogance." The distinction was accurate and insightful. Zara found herself reassessing the man sitting across from her desk. "Your 5 minutes are up," she observed, though she made no move to end the conversation. "I know. I just wanted you to understand that your rejection, professional and personal, was the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to confront who I really was versus who I thought I should be." Harrison stood to leave, then paused at the door. "For what it's worth, I hope you find someone worthy of the extraordinary woman you are. Someone secure enough to celebrate your success rather than feel threatened by it." After he left, Zara sat in her office as Manhattan's lights began twinkling in the gathering dusk. Harrison's visit had been unexpected but oddly healing. Not because she needed his apology, but because it confirmed something she'd always believed. People could change if they possessed the courage to confront their own flaws. Her phone buzzed with a text from the twins. "Dinner at 7? We made reservations at that new place you wanted to try. Zara smiled, gathering her things for the evening. Amara and Tyler were growing into remarkable young people, confident, compassionate, and completely unimpressed by their mother's wealth. They loved her for who she was, not what she'd achieved. As her heels clicked across marble floors toward another evening with the people who mattered most, Zara Williams reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She'd stopped pretending to be ordinary and embraced the extraordinary woman she'd always been. The experiment in Mendocino had taught her that the right person would love her empire, not despite it, but because it represented her intelligence, vision, and determination. Someone worthy of her wouldn't ask her to dim her light, they'd help her shine brighter. Perhaps that person was out there, learning to be worthy of someone who refused to apologize for her success. Perhaps Harrison Blake was becoming that kind of man, though not for her. But Zara Williams would never settle for perhaps again. She deserved certainty. She deserved celebration. She deserved a love as extraordinary as the empire she'd built. And until she found it, she would continue building, creating, and showing the world that the most dangerous thing you can do to a powerful woman is underestimate her. The gold digger had turned out to be made of diamonds. And diamonds, as everyone knows, are unbreakable.